I really don't think there's any way to review 2064 Read-Only Memories Integral without discussing controversial issues, because that's a lot of what the game focuses on, whether I find those issues controversial or not. It's just a lot of hot button topics, a lot of issues that people have been debating for years and will continue to debate. A lot of topics that get people riled up and angry and make them uneasy, but that's a huge part of the narrative of the game. And even just by talking about the game, there's controversial subjects like the developer and the issues that sprung up within the development team. So there's just a whole bunch of things to discuss, and it's not usually an area that I wander into with my reviews, but it's impossible to cover this game and not discuss them. I've tried recording this review a whole bunch of times, and I ended up trashing every single one of them. I think I've gone through like 7 different recordings, but eventually I was just like, you know, instead of tiptoeing and all this stuff, why don't we just address it head on and be open and honest, because that's actually part of what the game is trying to drive home. So I figured I'd use it in this review. I thought I'd start with the controversial topics of the developer themselves, Mid-Boss. And this is something that didn't actually exist or wasn't known by the public when the game originally came out on other platforms, but it didn't hit the Switch until after all this stuff was out in the open. It actually delayed the release of the Switch version by, I want to say, close to a year because of all these issues. So it's going to be inelegant, but the quick version of it is Mid-Boss's CEO was accused of a whole bunch of stuff, sexual harassment and underpaying employees and just being an all-around crappy person. And the story first came out, and then other people started to say that they experienced the same things while they were working at the company, and it just became like a huge discussion. And eventually the CEO was like, well, I'm not going to fight back against these because I'm not going to say they're inaccurate, blah, 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 blah. He ended up leaving the company. They had an interim CEO come in and all that stuff. So some people might look at a review of this game and say, like, why are you giving this developer money? Why are you supporting the practices that went on at Mid-Boss? And, you know, I can't say that those people are wrong. I can't say that those people don't have an argument to make. And I'm certainly saddened to hear about what happened at the company and all that stuff. But on top of that, there are people that worked extremely hard to get this game out and believed in the game's message, and hopefully all of the team that was involved really did believe in the game that they were making, regardless of the issues that cropped up at their work. Obviously those have been dealt with now, and they've openly talked about them and gotten that out in the air. And as far as I could see, none of the developers were like, I don't want this game out there anymore, take this game off the market or anything like that. So while they were working under some rather horrendous situations, at least some of the employees, seems like the universal voice from the team is they believe in the project and support the game itself and what the game's trying to do. So that's my justification for playing it. And also on top of that, I guess I could go with the basic explanation of I review video games and this is a video game. So if anything I've said has offended you, and my decision to review the game has offended you based on what I've just told you about the developer and all that stuff, like I said, I can't argue against that, and I understand where you're coming from, and I want you to know it also gives me an uneasy feeling. But as I said, I tried to do research and came to the conclusion that I did, and that's why I'm providing you this review. Now, the story of 2064 itself is going to court controversy because its main thread is about human rights. It addresses human rights through the humans in the game, through the robots, and then there's a whole storyline about how humans can get modifications or enhancements to give them new abilities, or just to look different because they feel like looking like something different. And some humans in the game feel that that's an abomination and humans shouldn't be doing that, and the other side says they have every right to do whatever they want to their body because it's their own. and there's obviously parallels to the real world with this stuff. And then the cast itself in the game has a lot of LGBTQ representation, and I know, again, that's a hot button issue for a lot of people. I'm not saying it is for me. I'll flat out say that it's not, because I have LGBTQ people in my life, very close people. So I understand that the topic makes people uncomfortable and enrages some people, and you know, it's a debate that's been going on for years and years and years, and unfortunately I don't think it's going to end. But the game addresses this stuff head on, and it certainly gives you multiple perspectives on the situation, and at certain points during the gameplay it asks you how you feel, and for the most part you do have a good range of answers to give, so you could steer the course of the narrative in the direction that you like, but it certainly leans more towards a positive outlook on LGBTQ people. So I know right there that's going to be a turnoff for some people, and you know, I'll keep to myself on that matter. So be it if that's going to push you away from the game, but the story and the experience of 2064 is out to make you think and make you uncomfortable in some ways, and perhaps look at things in ways that you never have before. So not usually something you see from games too often, and certainly not something you see from games handled this head on and this strongly. So it's gonna be a very interesting experience for a lot of people. Finally, getting to a little bit more of the lighter controversy with the game will be just how the gameplay is handled, because 2064, it's for all intents and purposes, it's a visual novel. You can click around on the scenes in the game to look at things, you know, and interact with them, but there's not a ton of interaction in every scene. There's a handful of items that you need to look at to progress the story, certainly, but we're talking about a lot of like dialogue options and listening to characters and things like that. So I know a lot of people are already not interested in the game because of that. And, you know, that's a genre that some people enjoy and some people don't. I'm open to every genre. I'll give any type of game a try, no matter what it is. I personally do like visual novels. I feel it's a nice break from, you know, the more standard, more popular genres that games provide. I'm not saying those are bad by any means, because I play all them too, but it's always nice to dip into something different. So I have no issue with that here. And the thing that is important to me is that the story itself is entertaining, because if you're making the story the focus of the game and the narrative is supposed to be the core of the gameplay, then it needs to be very strong, and I feel it is here. So I didn't mind it one bit, but again, I don't want to say that it's a flat-out visual novel, because it's not. You'd call it like a point and click, I guess, but much less interaction than your average point and click. If you're familiar with Snatcher, it's very much obviously inspired by Snatcher, but also plays a bit like Snatcher as well. So limited interactions, a lot of discussion and talking with different characters and things like that. So as long as you're okay with storyline being the main motivator, the main game, quote-unquote gameplay element, then you should be down with what 2064 offers. With the story being the main reason to play 2064, I can tell you I greatly enjoyed it. I really found that it had some extremely well-written characters, which there aren't too many games where I feel like there's very well-written characters. There's a handful of them, but here I feel like the characters really have their own personalities. They never do anything that feels out of character for what they've portrayed up to that point. And they're really interesting and engaging. Everybody I met had something to them that made me want to learn more about them. And the whole game is about the relationships that you have with these people. Now, on top of that, there's a whole mystery element that I don't want to spoil at all. And there's a whole bunch of twists and turns. And I'd like to think that I'm not an idiot. And I figured out some of the things along the way, but not all of them. There were definitely some surprises, some moments where I was like, oh, I really didn't see that coming. So, I mean, That's the sign of at least a somewhat good story to me, because I couldn't predict every twist and turn that it was going to make. And it's not one of those situations where it's like this guy's that guy and this girl was really that girl. It's not like that. It's, you know, much more organic and well done than that. And then on top of that, when you have an experience where the story is the focus, and there's voice acting, I feel like the voice acting can really make or break that experience. Great voice acting can help you run through the experience smoother, and poor voice acting can really ruin it, because it can ruin a character. You can read a character one way, and if you hear them a different way, you're like, oh, that completely ruins it for me. But I'm very happy to say 2064 has some phenomenal voice acting. Again, I was blown away by what was done here. They really nailed it with the characters. There's maybe only maybe one character that I'd say is subpar as far as voice acting goes, but not. I wouldn't say they're bad by any means. It's just that everyone else is so good that they stuck out a little bit. But yeah, it's such a phenomenal voice cast. I can't remember the last game I played where I was as wowed as I am with the voice cast as I was with this one. It's very clear that a lot of time went into picking the right people to handle these roles, and they did a great job. There's some people who provided voice work in there that you might know if you follow the games industry, or even outside of the games industry, and then there's other people that you've never heard of, but altogether they do a fantastic job, and boy, they help the story come to life in a completely different way. The visuals are retro, as you've seen, and I like the look of the game, but it's not, you know, uber fancy graphics or anything like that. And with so much narrative going on, having someone basically reading the lines for you or acting out the lines really just adds something deeper to the experience. It's like almost like an audiobook. And all of that stuff together, I just can't say enough good things about the story, the voice actors, how it was all handled, the way it's written. All of it came together really well. Whether you're a fan of the messages the game is trying to portray or not, that's a different story, but I'm just saying on a base level of like story structure and how it's acted and stuff like that, I felt they did a really good job. The game's soundtrack goes hand in hand with that. The soundtrack is definitely one of those soundtracks that I'm going to listen to for a long time to come. I've been listening to the soundtrack since I started playing the game. On YouTube when I'm working, I stream the soundtrack, and I just can't get enough of it. It's, how do I describe it? It's synth and like old school anime and FM and like lots of retro gaming style music and moody, and there's so many good songs, and each character has their own theme, and then sometimes that theme is twisted a little bit depending on their mood, and not a bad song in there really that I can think of. And like I said, I've been listening to the soundtrack nonstop while I work, so I think that goes to show just how much I really enjoy it. If everything else you've heard about the game turns you off and you've decided you don't want to play it, I think the only not controversial, or the only element here that wouldn't court controversy, is the soundtrack. So do yourself a favor and listen to the music on its own, because I really think you're going to enjoy it. 2064 is another one of those games in a very small group for me where it's going to stick with me for years to come, and in some small ways molds how I feel and think about things. There's a couple other games in there, like let's say Undertale, for example, was a game that had some storyline elements and some character discussions in there that really made me like step back and think about things, like think about how I operated and think about how I approach stuff. And long after the game ended, I still think about those things, and I've presented Undertale to other people and watched them play through it, and the majority of them have felt the same way, just like afterwards been like, wow, that's a really interesting experience and it really makes you think. And that's what I got from 2064. You spend a lot of time with the characters. It's a pretty lengthy game, so you really get to know them, and like I said, these hot button issues are constantly brought at you, and sometimes you have to make decisions based on how you feel in the real world about these things. So it's something I definitely don't take lightly, and it's something I think that games could do more with. I'm not saying every game has to be heady and has to address these topics or has to court controversy or anything like that, but certainly we could all do with a little more of a game industry that takes a look at these things and makes us question things and makes us look at how we're set in our ways with some stuff, no matter what the topic might be. There's a million different topics that people get riled up about, but just having games like 2064 that make us look at some of these things under a magnifying glass, I think is a good thing. I can appreciate, even if I do or don't agree with a game's message, I can always appreciate when a game really puts something under a microscope and says, here, look at this, don't turn away from it, don't go with the reaction you always have, like break things down and let's really figure out why you feel the way you do. So I can appreciate that. When you look at the developer controversy and the topics the game covers and the type of gameplay the game provides, 2064 just seems like it keeps narrowing down the potential audience that it's going to reach, but I hope some people do check it out. I hope I've convinced some people that you might want to take a look at it and see what it has to offer, because it's a really interesting game. Not too many games come along like this. I know it's been out for quite some time, but I have a feeling a lot of people, A, didn't know it existed, and B, skipped over it for any number of reasons, but maybe now's the time to give it a shot and see what you think. So this is the type of game I could discuss to no end, and if I was talking about it with spoilers, there's so much more to get into. I'd love to do that at some point. I'd love to talk about it in a way where I could just openly discuss everything that happens in the game and some of the major plot points and stuff like that, and see what you guys think, see what other people think. But like I said, when the game is story focused, I really don't want to spoil that stuff for you. So maybe again in the far off future I will come at it in a different way. But for now, I've given you how I feel. And certainly you can see that it wasn't the easiest thing for me to talk about, because I usually am very conscious of making sure I keep everybody happy and don't feel like I step on anybody's toes or anything like that. Not because I don't have a spine or any of my own feelings or anything like that, but because, you know, we're talking about video games here. We're supposed to have fun, play games, laugh, and just be silly. But sometimes games come along where you're forced to do more than that, and as I said, I think that's a good thing. So if you're willing to do more than that and you're looking for a break from what games usually provide, 2064 is going to give you one hell of a unique experience. Hey guys, RMC here from Go Nintendo. If you like what you saw in the video, why don't you give us a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe? We'd love to have you. If you want to see what else we're up to, you can check out GoNintendo.com for 24-hour Nintendo news. You can visit us on Facebook at Facebook.com/GoNintendo. You can check us out on Twitter at Twitter.com/GoNintendoTweet. And we're even over on Instagram at Instagram.com/GoNintendo. I put all the links in the description just to make it easier for you guys to follow. Thanks a lot.